Hey, it is your buddy, Peace and Harmony with you here today. In much love and Merry Christmas to all the empowered harmonizers. We are zooming in and focusing in on a great book recommendation that I would like to make for you here today. I've received a number of comments and compliments, not only for the work, but they appreciate book recommendations. So for my viewers, I want to give you, if you've been through very severe abusive, neglectful, hurtful, and damaging relationships with a narcissist or a psychopath, and you're really experiencing some of the PTSD, the real ramifications of the hurt, the psychological warfare that takes place, I would highly recommend a work by Pete Walker, W-A-L-K-E-R, and that is called Complex PTSD, From Surviving to Thriving. It's quite a large book, but there's a lot of valuable content that the author goes into. And he talks about in chapter 9, shrinking the inner critic. And now realize that at the root, oftentimes, of a lot of suffering is this sort of embedded inner critic, that is assigning all these negative things to you, which really don't belong, but it's just really kind of like a continuous loop that is playing. And part of empowerment is just putting an end to that loop. It's like hearing music that is just not, that is not set up on a random or, different songs, things of that nature. There's a constant loop playing. So the inner critic is very much the same way. And until you break the cycle, that inner critic is going to have, dominion over how you feel and who you become, the professions that you choose, the hobbies that you pursue, the positive inspirations that come to you and you follow up on, the money that you make, the relationships that you'll have, where you live. All of that will either keep you down or lift you up. So I really want to go into that real quick. And he talks about, in his chapter 9, the origin of the CPSD critic. And it says, a flashback-inducing critic is typically spawned in a danger-ridden childhood home. This is true whether the danger comes from the passive abandonment of neglect or the active abandonment of abuse. When parents do not provide a safe enough bonding and positive feedback, the child flounders in anxiety and fear. And many children appear to be hardwired to adapt into this endangered abandonment with perfectionism. So that's a beautiful statement, and he talks very much about what it's like in the beginning of, a child's home when they are experiencing this sort of feeling of danger, this feeling of threat, the feeling that this is constantly looming, something is not okay. And I put forth to you that very much the love bombing stage of a narcissist, especially if you had a vision of spending the rest of your life with this person, whether that was held as a belief or a dream or a desire by this other person or not, is irrelevant. Maybe you discussed it together, maybe you didn't. But when you enter into that dream-like state of really getting into an intimate relationship where it's like a fairy tale relationship, I mean, it's very good, it's very passionate, everything is really copacetic, everything seems to be so lovely and delightful, and like it's the answer to your prayers, and then you find out a bitter truth. You find out not only is it bittersweet, it tends to be all bitter. You find out that they're very resistant or not open to you. They can't listen. They engage in pathological lying. They engage in cheating behaviors. They might have stolen part of your finances. They might have, left you without your children. They might have, really caused threats and smear campaigns to you or at your workplace or whatever it is that this individual is trying to manipulate. And then, so what ends up being experienced then is this feeling of danger, and that this feeling of threat continues to be pervaded in the individual as a feeling of like an inner critic. So in other words, it's always trying to recreate the danger that was there experienced before. So it becomes very hardwired, especially because there is so much emotion and energy in motion, which has hardwired it into place. In other words, something with a higher emotion, you're really going to remember. Like you might remember a very beautiful church service or a very beautiful religious moment, or certain things might stand out in your mind when you had, this great award-winning moment at your work, or you had your first child, or when you first fell in love. So these are really kind of emblazoned or emboldened or really sort of wired in or fired into the neural network, your memories, your feelings. There's a lot of meaning that is tied in circles around that experience. And so perhaps finding out the very first time that this person cheated on you, that they were no good, you launched into the same fear, almost like an abandoned child. I mean, I feel that those people who have been so enmeshed, it's complete. The hurt is complete. In other words, it takes up all of your focus, your feeling process, your decision making. Everything seems to revolve and pivot around this, and this person then becomes almost like a parent or a caregiver to you, where your life then is like depending on their relationship with you, with their caregiving, with their shelter for you. And then what I also like about his statement here is that he says, and then the children adapt to this endangered abandonment with perfectionism. I mean, they will solidify that to the T, because what is the child or what is the supply but to be the perfect mate, to be, the answer to the prayers, to be on their best behavior. So they adapt this negativity with perfectionism. So that's why we see these dark moments, and these people, why it takes so long to heal and why it's so different from just the typical, because so much of your identity and your safety and your investment of your time and your emotion had been really given all up in that love bombing phase. You had given it all. You had loved them with such completion. They had completed you. All these different feelings of really fitting together, the gestalt, that was part of the illusion. You now should come to a state of wholeness, which is really what healing is, and not feel like you ever have to give that up. In other words, for the next person to enter into your doorway, your complete self must answer the door and say hello. You must be there in completion. For your next, mate to come to the door, they must be met, they must be introduced to you in your wholeness now, so that you're not bringing this forward. You're not bringing forward this inner critic into future relationships. And that's part of why the CPTSD sets in, is because then the inner critic and the outer critic, you tend to hyper generalize the world at large. All people are nasty. All people are dangerous. I cannot trust anybody. Eyes to the ground. Eyes shielded. I am boxing myself in. It's because you go into ultra self-protection mode. And so that's where the healing has to begin. Yes, but it's realizing how it got put in there and how it was just at a momentary need for another to get what they needed. In other words, to control the situation. The narcissist has an insatiable need to control. So that is the why. It has nothing to do with you. It has nothing to do with your inner goodness, your inner love, your inner light, your inner self-trust and self-belief, and your inner contentment. They had installed basically in your feeling set this inner critic, which then transmutes into the outer critic. So to see if you can understand that and then catch that before that inner critic starts to, take place, say, I've got you now. I've got you now. I will take care of you now. I am right here. Learn to kind of be close to yourself and protect yourself. And, do this with a sense of self-protection. And this is usually limited with balance and boundaries. So in other words, if something is going on too long, you know when to say stop. You're not overworking. You're not over-obligating yourself. You're not trying to get yourself into an out of balance state. Sure, part of life, you are required to go out of balance during specific spurts of movement, but not, for weeks and days on end, oftentimes, which is what happens. So see if you can identify this and then tell that inner critic, it's okay, I've got it now. Tell that inner critic goodbye and realize it was there for a certain amount of time, but you're glad to see that inner foe go. You're glad to see that foe go. It's okay. I don't need an enemy within me now. Go to the light. Move on, my brother or sister. Just go into the light, and I've got myself now. And here we are safe. See if you can give yourself that resonance and that inner resonance and do it again and again wash, rinse, and repeat. In other words, keep doing it so you experience more prolonged states of that. And then you'll find that then you'll be able to identify more clearly what you want, who you want to have in your life. You can invite them in or out, what professions you want to pursue that are in that higher standard for you, where you're not feeling endangered by the work environment, or you're not saying no because it's too challenging. You're now able to adapt and adapt to such stress by being inner confident and having that inner power, which is really that inner dialogue that's just so important when coming through these types of relationship. It is your buddy, Peace and Harmony, with you here today, and I hope that these videos do help. Please share and please subscribe. Much love to the Empowered Harmonizers. Love you.